everybody, welcome back. We're talking Marvel Snap. Has this guy changed the meta? Is everybody using him? I will say up front, he is one of the more fun cards. I do like what he brings to the table, and I am seeing a lot of him. So we're gonna look at some of the data specifically from Marvel Snap Zone about what has changed, if anything, in the meta. And I'm gonna give some of my thoughts too based on what they've got in this article, because I think maybe while he's fun, things are still the same. I like to cover things that show up that I find interesting on Marvel Snap Zone. This week in particular, they have a article about how the monkey is a hit. It's all about Hit Monkey. I'll put the link in the description below if you want to read it and go through it a little bit more in detail. The summation of what they've got here is that it's a good card. A lot of people are using it to get to infinite, and it's fun. Now, the question really is, does it change the meta at all? And we'll look at that data shortly. We did a video previously about cards to use with Hitmonkey and counters. They cover a lot of that in here. This first section, they do talk about Bounce and Sarah are the key sort of decks to use with Hitmonkey. I think that's probably expected. We'll see what other decks come around for the card, but that's definitely the most, I'd say, impactful decks. Now, one thing I find very interesting is they say that both of those archetypes have seen their win rate and cube rate soar over the past few days. So I think that's awesome. Now, I do think that since they're being played a lot more, that I could see this, but I do want to give Hitmonkey a ton of credit here because I think he was a critical card in making those decks better. Now, one thing I want to point out here is Sarah Control even became more popular than Shuri Zero in some portions of the ladder. So we're going to look at that. I have not necessarily seen that to be the case, but I am seeing a lot of Sarahs. So anyway, this again, everything you've got in here is based on a tracker. So if people aren't using it, the data is a bit skewed. They also mentioned that while a lot of people are still using Shuri Zero to get to infinite, the Shuri Zero deck is not going to be featured. And again, I think a big part of it has to do with what they say here is there are some nerfs that were happening later in the week, so they didn't necessarily collect a lot of data. They point out that players are still trying to figure out what can compete with a Shuri Zero as far as a point shootout. Again, I don't think there's really many, if any, decks that can do that. So they talk about what decks are on the rise at the start of this new season. And again, it's focused on Hitmonkey, and they also bring up Electro Ramp as a counter. This is the deck that they've got in here. The Hitmonkey makes a good deck better. They call it Paint Infinite. This is sort of what you'd expect to see with a Hitmonkey deck. They've got the Bishop, they've got the Angela, they've got the Mysterio. I think all of those are pretty solid. They don't have a Beast in this one. They do have a Zabu. They've got it mainly for the Wong, Absorbing Man, and then a Shang-Chi counter for maybe if you're going against any of those Shuri decks. And then you've got the Sarah to hopefully dump a bunch of stuff in on that final turn. And they've also got Bast to try to get any of these lower cards up. Now, there is a slight risk of lowering Mysterio and Sarah, but the truth is losing 1 point on those cards isn't really that big of a deal because they're meant to be feeding other cards. I do love the combination of Luke Cage and Hazmat. You can use Absorbing Man to do the combo with Hazmat on a Wong, which is obviously fantastic. You can also use the Absorbing Man on a Shang-Chi if there are multiple big cards across the table. The deck can put up pretty decent points. Again, they talk here like, is it going to compete with the Shuri Zero type deck? I don't necessarily know, but again, you've got Shang-Chi in there. They bring up Thanos Lockjaw. Obviously, this is still a popular deck. I personally have not seen a bunch of this. Again, there's multiple versions on how to play this, but you'll still see tons of Thanos out there. I still think he's one of the better decks out there. You're obviously no more Quinjet. They specifically say it has not picked up popularity again. That's interesting, and honestly, based on the gameplays I've had, I would tend to agree. I haven't seen Thanos, I think, once this season. And obviously they bring up the Electro Sandman because anytime you're playing Bounce, Sarah, something that's going to bring a lot of cards. Again, we talked about this in the video previously. You're going to get a Sandman type. You're going to want to try to have an Electro or something along those lines to bring him in earlier. And that is going to be something that's going to be a great counter for something like Hitmonkey or Sarah. I'm not surprised by this. Again, there's different versions of this deck you could potentially throw out there, but it's pretty solid. So they really highlight Hitmonkey and talk about what if this is really the most popular card. it's seen a lot more. So I actually went to their meta section so that I could look at the specific data. And I've sorted this right now. So I've got the last 7 days. I'm shooting this as of April 9th. And I've also currently got collection level 486 through 3,500. We'll look at 3,500 plus in a second. And I've got it as far as meta share. I'm not doing win rate, average cubes, or anything like that. We'll look at some average cubes in a second. And the first thing I see is Shuri 0. So I'm going, no, Shuri's still the most popular thing. Now, again, I get it that they don't want to necessarily highlight it, but it's still, I mean, it's still dramatically higher. And then Sand Electro, you're seeing that a lot because of Hitmonkey. Sarah Control, obviously, now this one, they don't have Hitmonkey showing up in this one, so it's still popular without Hitmonkey, and it's 8.9 versus the 13.5 of Shuri 0, and even the 9.31 of Sand Electro. And then the Monkey Sarah is right around the same 8.65% of the meta share. Pretty good. And then it drops off significantly, so we won't even look at anything beyond that. But you're seeing that those 4 decks, Sarah, Monkey Sarah, the counter or one of the counters was Sand Electro, and then the main meta piece, which is Shuri 0. So I wanted to then look at, all right, well, what about average cubes? Well, then you get Surfer Sarah. Okay, well, that appears to be the top cube gainer right now, which I thought was very interesting. Sarah Control is a little bit behind that. Okay, no Hitmonkey in that one. Then you got what they call Monkey Finisher. I don't know. I mean, it's similar. They've got a bunch of 1 cards. I guess they're interesting. I don't know why Hawkeye's in here. I do like the one Nightcrawler with the Angela. We've highlighted that before. I personally would change this a bit to get Mysterio in here with the Bishops and maybe with the Hitmonkey late turn. I like that. You do a Hitmonkey, Mysterio, Squirrel Girl, something else there. That's a great turn and just going to start racking up the points. So I would make some adjustments on that one. But again, the average cubes there are solid. And then you've got a Shuri 0 right there. So of the ones that we're talking about popular before, you know, there you see the meta share pretty high. That's a pretty good average cubes. Again, now you're not seeing a ton of this apparently much, but this is an easy I mean, if you bought the season pass, play this. I mean, this Monkey Finisher deck here, I would make some changes. But even if you're looking up here, okay, so maybe Surfer Sarah is a little bit harder to get, but I mean, Surfer's the one card maybe that, I mean, I personally don't have Brood or Silver Surfer, but I mean, a lot of these other cards are pretty easy to get. Sarah Control, very similar other than Darkhawk. So if you're having trouble with these two, you come down here and you bought the season pass for, again, $10 isn't too bad. This is an easy deck to play. I would highly recommend doing that just for the average cubes, but it's sort of crazy that the meta share is so low on this if these average cubes are really what they're getting there, because that's pretty good. And again, Shuri 0, everybody's doing it, but the average, and this is really the most important stat in the game in my mind, outside of the fun factor, which can you even judge that? I mean, that's all subjective for each individual person. I would maybe think about doing this, but remember, you're going to start getting that Electro Sandman ramp. And then it starts getting in some Galactus Nimrod, MODOK Dracula, all pretty good average cubes, 0.9. And then it gets into the 0.8s. We're not going to go any further past that. But they do have a Hitmonkey deck in here, one that was not discussed earlier. And again, I think average cubes are the most important thing. So maybe think outside the box a little bit and do something like this that could maybe help you build up the rankings a lot quicker. I did want to highlight the Monkey Sarah one. It is a little bit lower here. It's 0.875 average cubes. Now, one of the things I do want to factor in with these is that since this is a hot deck right now, you're probably getting a lot of counters, so the average cube rates could be lower. But again, it's a monkey deck, and so is this one up here. Again, I like this deck that they had in here a lot better. If you don't have all of these, I would start sort of making something in between this one and this one. I would drop Iron Man for sure. I would probably maybe drop Blue Marvel. I don't know. It depends on sequence of cards and everything, but this is a good deck to build off of. Let's jump over to the 3,500 plus. We're going to stay in the average cubes. MODOK Dracula. What? That's the highest average cubes in that range. So MODOK is the best deck right now with Dracula. All right. That's darn impressive. Spectrum Destroyer. Again, pretty solid. Okay, that's a high average cube rate. Nobody's talking about this right now. And look at the meta share here. Nobody is playing this. What cards in here are hard to get? Literally none of them. I mean, Destroyer's the hardest card to get out of that. That's kind of bonkers, but it's got one of the best average cube gains. Then again, Shuri 0. So huge meta share, and you can see the percent jump here too. We're going to look at that specifically in a second, but it's at 0.8. So the average cubes drop off a little bit, but it's still pretty good. So if you were looking for the best cubes at 3,500 plus, MODOK Dracula, Spectrum Destroyer, Shuri 0, Dracula dump. The whole idea behind that is just get all your cards out there, and Dracula discards whatever's the highest thing in your hand still. Pretty solid actual deck there. Now let's look at this again. We're not going to look any further past that because they drop off as far as average cubes go. But let's look at meta share. Again, Shuri 0. Shuri 0. And now just because people are playing this doesn't mean it's necessarily a great deck. Now, do I think some adjustments still sort of need to be made? Maybe, but I don't want them to nuke Shuri. I think that this average cubes here is what everybody should really be looking at. I wish everybody could track this. I am sure Second Dinner has these actual stats because they can track it all in game. I would love to know what Second Dinner's average cube rates are here compared to what Snap zones are. Are they dramatically different? I don't think they're going to share that because it would really hurt the website, and frankly the website helps advertise the game. So don't do that, Second Dinner, but I would be curious. Maybe tweet me in my DMs or something. Slide in there. All right, so next up is Monkey Sarah. High meta share, but look at this average cubes. 0.68. That's not, I mean, comparatively speaking, it's not great. So I don't love that. The win rate is decent, but the average cubes, you're not getting a lot there. It's got Darkhawk, which could be a hard card for some folks to get, but it is it's a solid deck there with okay average cubes. But again, a lot of use. Monkey Bounce, a little bit, actually, this Monkey Bounce has a better average cube than the actual Monkey Sarah here. So if you're really like playing the bounce decks, I would look at this one. Slightly better average cube. Sand Electro, again, this is going to be in here because you're playing these monkey type decks. So inherently the counter to the decks that are the most popular is going to be in there. And the average cubes is okay, not great. So is it a great counter? Well, I mean, it's solid and it can beat a lot of different things, but the cube rates there are not that high. And then it starts getting into 7%, 6%. So we're not going to go into that. So Shuri 0 is still the most popular deck, period. It is. Is it the greatest average cubes? No, oddly, it's not. So, I mean, come here, look at the average cubes, MODOK Dracula, Spectrum Destroyer. I love seeing stuff like that because what is the real meta? Is it what we all say it is on Twitter and Discord and Reddit? Or is it based on some of this data? And again, Second Dinner should have some of this. I would love if they actually publish this, but I don't think they will. I'm not mad at them for it, but again, I would love to really know that data. So what are your thoughts? Are you going to be using this guy? Do you think he really is the most popular? I definitely think he's fun. Last season, we had Nimrod, who got forgotten pretty quickly and is still not that popular of a card. I think I would fully expect Nimrod to be adjusted in the future to make him better. Hitmonkey, I think, really does appeal. Get it? Appeal. Okay, sorry. I had to throw some joke in there at some point, I guess, for bananas. I don't know. We got to do banana puns. Comment below with all your banana puns. I'd love to hear them. So I'm excited about him. I don't think it is as popular and winning as they were saying necessarily when I saw it, because I was like, oh, this is taking over the meta. And I saw the data. I was like, oh, well, yeah, it's up there. But there are a lot of good decks out there. I highly recommend playing them. Think about them. Metas are always about what's shifting and what's changing and trying to stay a step ahead. Not just as each game like a chess or poker match, the whole meta is as well. So you've got to try to collect that data and think about it. So I hope you find this video helpful. If you do, please consider hammering down that like button. Share with your aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. Always appreciate that. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.